This miniature was primed with an airbrush using black Vallejo primer followed by zenithal spray of white ink. I then had to clean up some rough spots with an X-Acto knife before hitting it with some of Army Painter's gloss varnish to smooth it back out, particularly the skin. Had I done a better job of cleaning up the mold lines beforehand, I wouldn't have to do this now. I decided to start with the flesh first, coating it with the magenta speed paint and allowing it to fully dry before throwing on some flesh-colored speed paint. Once completely dry, I begin glazing the shadows. For every step on the flesh, with the exception of the very last highlight, the paint is thinned to a glaze and applied 3 to 5 times, allowing for each application to fully dry before applying the next. It's painfully slow, but taking my time helps prevent from tearing up a previous layer that was only partially dried. I'm still very much a novice when it comes to controlling glazing, but I'm making progress, and for a very long time, this miniature will look rough. I then begin glazing on the first highlight, letting it overlap where the other highlights will be, as well as driving into the shadow some. If I wanted an easier time with this, I could have used a solid base coat of a mid-tone on the skin, instead of using 2 speed paints. Anywhere the speed paints pool due to any residual mold lines or unsmooth areas will be harder to glaze evenly, which has become the point for me ever since I tried this on the Christmas Sophie I painted at the end of 2024. I will be alternating how I glaze in projects, some to purposely make it harder and some to keep it easier and faster, in the hopes that I'll get better at glazing. Next, I glaze in some magenta to add some warmth to the body, inner thighs, behind the knees, under the arms and armpits, the neck, cheeks, and around the nose are places I usually hit. The next highlight glazed is a peach glaze to further lighten the skin tone. At this point, the transitions aren't very smooth by any means, and it's still very rough, but I keep at it undeterred, patient and knowing that it will get better. At this point, I repeat all the steps of the flesh done up until now, excluding the 2 speed paints. In each one of these steps, I continue to apply each color over 3 to 5 applications, and again ensuring each layer has dried before applying the next. With each color glazed again, I can see a noticeable and reassuring improvement. I then move on to adding a new color for the highlights, also being glazed 3 to 5 times, as needed, and covering slightly less area each time. The last highlight I apply is not a glaze, but a somewhat thinned highlight of light pink. This is the highest of the highlights I'll be adding, so I apply this sparingly in areas that would receive the most light. I finish the flesh off with a touch of transparent brown ink around the socks and where the flesh butts up against clothing, as well as for little bits of darker shadows such as for the ears and around the hairline. For the jeans, I keep it simple, base coating it in blue followed by 2 shadows. The second, darker shadow is limited to only the darkest areas, such as under the lower torso. I apply 2 highlights, each in scratchy hatching lines in an effort to mimic worn denim. I then finish the jeans by applying a little transparent dark blue ink for the shadows. For the cut-off tank top and socks, I wanted white, which I'll build up to, but I start with the base coat of the same blue I used for the jean shorts, which will be followed up by 3 highlights. The first a light blue, the second an off-white, and then finally a pure white. I decided I wanted socks with hearts on them, so with 2 shades of red I painted them on. First a darker red for the general shape, and then a lighter red to add a little bit of a highlight to them, to help feel a little more three-dimensional. For the hair, I base coated it black. The first highlight is then done with a dark blue and applied to about 70–80%, avoiding the areas around the headband and the part in the hair. The second and third highlights for the hair are applied in the same places but covering slightly less area. These are just increasingly brighter colors of blue as they get smaller. I try to focus them around the crown of the head or strands that are hanging loose. The same is done with the fourth and final highlight of off-white. This will cover a very small area, and unlike the other colors, I connect this highlight between some of the sculpted strands. I then finish the hair with a glaze of blue and black to help smooth the transition of dark to lighter highlights, though I do not put this glaze on the brightest off-white highlight at all. For the gun, I first base coat it with silver and then I hit it with dark tone wash. Once it's dry, I follow it with the purple speed paint. For some reason, I have the old song Purple People Eater stuck in my head, and I decided to make the gun themed after it. Once the speed paint is dry, I come back with the same silver to add scratches and highlights to the edges. and then I paint the coppery gold parts using the same steps, but with a different color speed paint. For the graffiti, I wanted a somewhat spray paint bubble font look, so I gave it an electric blue background before I began painting in the words. Now it's not shown on camera, but I did practice painting the letters on the gun before I base coated it silver. This way I had an idea of how I needed to space the letters. I then used a damp brush to remove all of the paint before it dried. The letters are sketched out in black first, then with yellow on top. I wanted to leave a little bit of the black outline around them, but I ended up covering more of it than I intended. I ignore that for now and then add an additional yellow as a highlight on parts of the letters. I finished the text off by adding a tiny amount of black around the letters and for the holes in the P's, O's, and A's. As for the leather parts in the base, those will be covered in another video in a week or two, as I painted another Dust 1947 miniature at the same time as this one. The base and leathers were painted in the same manner for both of them, so by stripping those steps from this video, I can keep the runtime shorter. And that'll bring this project to its end. For lessons learned, I'm haunted by mold lines and need to try even harder this year to reduce their presence. I did like how the flesh came out ultimately, though there are a lot of areas that should be brighter. I could have also stood to go through all of the glazes on the flesh for one more time, to have a better and smoother finish. The letters could have also come out better on the gun, more cleaner to be specific. I should have used my best brush for writing them out instead of my worn out base coating brush. I hope you learned something or inspired to start or expand your own collection of soldiers sporting vibrant weaponry defaced with song titles from the 1950s. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, you can easily support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.